Hi, folks. Welcome to the Mike Lopez TV Show. I'm your host, ACMike. We'll bring you all things Atlantic City, politics, sports, dining, entertainment, and so much more. On today's show, I have the pleasure of engaging with two gentlemen who are very well known in the local area. First is Judge Nelson Johnson, author of the New York Times best-selling book, Boardwalk Empire, The Birth, High Times, and Corruption of Atlantic City, which inspired the Emmy Award-winning hit HBO series Boardwalk Empire. Also with us today is Ralph Hunter, founder and director of the African American Heritage Museum of Southern New Jersey. So stick around, we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Our next guests for today's show are Judge Nelson Johnson, author, and Ralph Hunter, founder and director of the African American Heritage Museum of Southern New Jersey. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Mike, we're glad to be here.
I'm delighted.
Listen, I could not be honored. These guys coming on out tonight and joining us here at Stockton University to talk a little history, talk a little present day, and talk a little future. Gosh, I would be remiss if I wouldn't say, starting from left to right, Mr. Hunter, please introduce yourself and tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Ralph Hunter. I'm president and founder of the African American Heritage Museum, which was first started back in '02. So we're celebrating our 20th anniversary as of February of last year. So it's really, really exciting to have the opportunity to come and hang out with you guys today and talk a little Atlantic City. Atlantic City's in my blood, and I'm sure it's in yours by now.
Absolutely. And Judge Johnson?
Mike, I'm a retired Superior Court judge. I'm also a full-time writer now. The two books that are relevant to tonight are Boardwalk Empire and The North Side. Boardwalk Empire inspired the HBO series. The North Side was a sequel to Boardwalk Empire. I tell people of the two books, The North Side is the more important one because if you remove the African American experience from Atlantic City's history, the town never comes to be. What it is, I don't know. Maybe it's Brigantine, maybe it's Sea Isle City, I have no idea. But it's not a resort that's able to host millions of people.
And this is definitely what we're going to touch on. I would like to say about that first book, New York Times bestseller, but this here was the one that grabbed me.
In terms of importance,
right.
The North Side's the more important book.
I agree with you 100%. And one of the first conversations I had when I moved to Atlantic City full time was with Mr. Hunter. I don't know if he recalls this, but we were talking. I don't remember exactly what meeting or what association, but we started talking about what went on in the inlet, the AC inlet, the amount of doctors and the hustle and bustle that was happening there. And I would love for the both of you to reflect on that, if you could, for our audience.
Well, the exciting part about Atlantic City's North Side, it was pretty important to have the opportunity to come to Atlantic City back in the early 50s on a bus trip and to see all of these people owning and operating their own businesses. Walking down the street, listening to music coming out of the nightclubs at the Club Harlem, going around the corner, seeing the great restaurants and the boarding houses and the hotels, owned and operated by people who look like me. And I was really fascinated. I just couldn't believe I was in a world such as Atlantic City. I'd come out of Philadelphia, out of the church, and so I had never seen this nightlife of Atlantic City. And I was really, really excited to have the opportunity to do that. So it's been in my blood. I love it. It's part of my DNA. And we talk more and more about Atlantic City. It's just a great place to have worked and grew up. It's just outstanding community. And the people here are just unbelievable.
Judge Johnson?
What Mr. Hunter's touching on is very important. The North Side was sort of a city within a city. Because of segregation, blacks were pushed to the north side of Atlantic City. But they responded to the challenge by creating their own city within a city. So when he talked about the things that he came to see in the 1950s, it's very accurate that there were hotels, there were restaurants, there were nightclubs. Back in the day, Atlantic City's north side was able to sustain 11 full-time physicians. Today, there isn't one. And it shows you how things have changed and not for the better over the years. But in its prime, Atlantic City's North Side was really sort of a mecca for entertainment, and was a mecca for people looking, for African American people looking for, you know, a place to go when they got to the resort. And so there was a lot of businesses that did thrive on the North Side.
And to speak on some of those business, Miss Washington and some of the entertainers that came in, and leaders, as we were speaking of before this interview, some of those leaders, Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It was a young lady by the name of Madam Sarah Spencer Washington. And of course, she was the head of a company called Apex Hair Care Products. She was one of the first African Americans in the United States of America, male or female, to own and operate her own golf course. Unbelievable. She also employed close to 3,500 people around the world as people starting their own businesses. So she was a lady who gave African American women an opportunity to become entrepreneurs. The first set of real entrepreneurs in this country were African American women.
How about that? I mean,
Well, no, Mr. Hunter is definitely correct. Sarah Spencer Washington was one of the first, I'm certain within the first, let's say 5, but probably first 2 or 3, female African Americans to be a multimillionaire. Brigantine Hotel, she owned it, but she had to buy it under somebody else's name because the owner wouldn't sell to a black person. Okay.
what year was this roughly?
That would have been in
Back
the
30s.
yeah, 20s or 30s, late 20s, early 30s, and she owned the golf course too in Pomona. She was a mogul, and touching on what Mr. Hunter said, she had many schools around the world, many graduates, and she would lend them money to get started, conditioned upon buying her product, okay, Apex, but she'd lend it interest-free. So she understood that if you give out a little bit, you get back a lot, and she had quite a dynasty.
And the beauty of that, and from reading your books and talking to Mr. Hunter and doing some more research and whatnot, was a lot of those young men and women, whether it was Miss Washington's courses and with Apex, came back to the community and stayed in this city, which I think we're kind of missing now.
Well, that happened because there were many beauty parlors throughout the city and throughout southern New Jersey, but these people were from all over the East Coast. They were in Chicago, they were in Baltimore, Washington, New York, all over where she had her universities, where she taught these young ladies how to become these great entrepreneurs. So she just wasn't in Atlantic City. She was an international corporation.
Johannesburg, South Africa.
Yeah.
Havana, Cuba.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, she was a mogul.
Yeah, I mean, when you say it like that and put those locations out there, it's worldwide. I mean, Atlantic City was, when you go into Boardwalk Hall, you see WPG. People ask me, what is that all the time? It was the world's playground. And I don't mean just for entertainment. It was, you can do pretty much anything. In this city, I would say, the Northeast, was that something that was prevalent all throughout the Northeast, or was that Atlantic City type?
No, it was prevalent throughout the whole country because you had areas where the African Americans who left the Deep South after slavery and came up here doing Brown versus Board of Education in the early 50s came north to come out of the cotton fields and tobacco farms, and they came north to work in the hospitality industry. So being part of the hospitality industry, Atlantic City was a great fit for them. So they would come here and work in the hotels, and they'd work the hotels, work the boardwalk, and they built the railroad, and they built the town, they cleared the beaches, and they did a wonderful, wonderful job of making Atlantic City what it is today. But these groups of people were from all over the country who came here. A lot of them were from the Deep South who came north to Atlantic City.
One of my passions, in addition to history, is art. And one of my favorite artists is a gentleman named Jacob Lawrence. He painted a large number of paintings depicting just what Mr. Hunter's talking about, which is the migration from the south to the north. He was born in Atlantic City.
How about that?
Right on Kentucky and Arctic Avenue.
So listen, guys, hold those thoughts right there. Folks, stick around. We'll be right back with these two gentlemen. So honored to be with them. Stick around. Welcome back to the show. We are here with Judge Nelson Johnson and Ralph Hunter. Gentlemen, thank you again for being out here today. Listen, we were talking a little bit Atlantic City, entrepreneurs, leaders. We get to the 60s, the convention. Then there's a little ebb and flow with the city. Mr. Hunter, talk to us about that a little bit, where it went, and then we're going to go to the 70s and then present day.
Okay, if I could just touch base on what happened in Atlantic City. It was called redlining. Redlining is a section of town where they would only sell or rent a house to a person of color. Redlining started when Atlantic City got started, when Nucky Johnson was here. Blacks lived on the north side of town, and they lived between Connecticut Avenue and Arkansas, from Atlantic Avenue back up to Venice Park, but not including Venice Park. Venice Park was all non-African American. So that was the area where the African Americans lived. And the town has really, really flourished back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And then what happened, the casino gambling started coming in the late 70s, and prior to that, they had the Miss America pageant here, and it didn't do so well. And then after that, of course, you had the thing that took place in Atlantic City that really changed everything. It was the Democratic National Convention when they came here in 1964. It was really, really great when President Johnson was nominated to become President of the United States. And there were some people here from the Mississippi Freedom Party. Fannie Lou Hamer, Dr. King was here. It was really, really a great time in Atlantic City. And I had the opportunity to be up on that boardwalk when that was going on. It was a great time in my life. And I'm sure the judge could really elaborate on it because he documented all of those things that took place.
It was an exciting time, the freedom of summer, 1964. LBJ chose Atlantic City because the Vietnam War was starting to really get out of control, and he wanted to be in Washington, but a helicopter ride away from the convention. New York was too far. Baltimore didn't have the proper facilities, so they chose Atlantic City. And Mr. Hunter's right. History got made here. The Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, it really exploded the Democratic Party of the South, because the Democratic Party of the South looked to Fannie Lou Hamer and they said, we're not going to rub elbows with her. And that's what began the biggest change in American politics, where the solid Democratic South in about 7, 8 years became the solid Republican South, and it has remained that way. The beginning of all that, the catalyst, was right here in Atlantic City. And it was a fascinating time.
Amazing. And as we move forward, Mr. Hunter mentioned it, the casinos, 75, 76, I guess.
79.
It was voted on in...
The first casinos opened up in May of 78.
Right, resorts.
Yeah, Resorts International. People were standing in line.
I remember looking at those pictures. Mom actually opened up in the housekeeping of my mom, so before she went to Kessler Clothing in Hamilton. But I remember the jackets. You had to wear a jacket and whatnot. But the reason I bring that up too right now, and we'll go into it, is with the casinos. Listen, we were going through an ebb and flow, as I like to call it. But when the casinos, late 70s, early 80s, a lot of the mom and pop sort of stores, retail, was that, a thing of the past? I mean, we still have some of our restaurants sticking around because the casinos would have now 4 or 5 restaurants, retail.
I think that's changed a great deal, because if you look back what was happening back in the 20s and 30s, where African Americans were forced to live in these areas and create their own businesses and their own hotels, that started to change once the casino industry opened up. If you ask yourself a question, there's only 4 basic businesses that survive today that could have survived back in the 20s and 30s. There's only 4 basic businesses that are still surviving in that contained red line area. And one of the businesses, of course, is the funeral parlors, the black church, the beauty parlors, and the barbershops. We had, like Judge said, 13 black doctors here. Now there's none. We had some 34 liquor licenses that were owned and operated by African Americans, and there's not one on the north side now. So it's the vanishing north side as we knew it back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Well, Judge?
Well, when Mr. Hunter and I met each other about 30 years ago, he was speaking at, the old public library.
Yeah.
And one of the first things that he said that I recall is, quote, one of the worst things that happened to Atlantic City was the American Civil Rights Movement. And when he first said it shocked the hell out of me.
Me too.
But as he explained it, I said, yeah, because here's what happened. People had the freedom to move, and some of them did move. And most of the people that moved were important role models for the community. And that's not just Atlantic City, that's all across America. Whether you go to Baltimore, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Kansas City, the old cities that had pockets of African Americans forced in there by segregation, many of them have really suffered from the exodus of successful people in the North Side. I mean, like I said, there's not one doctor in the North Side today. There was 13, 70 years ago.
That I find, gosh, I don't know what to say. It's speechless. It's just what has happened.
No, it just happened in Atlanta. It's happened all over the country.
Right.
No, I said,
universal.
but here's what it is. It's what I call the law of unintended consequences.
Very good. Very well said, Judge.
You can set out to do something good. You can succeed in doing the good thing, and then an unforeseen consequence that's negative pops up and like, oh man, how'd that happen? We never saw that coming. Okay, and that happens a lot. I mean, sometimes the better grows out of the worst, and the worst grows out of the better. I mean, that's history, and you don't really understand it until it's you're down the road away, and you look back and you say, oh man, I didn't see that coming.
Right. It's just slams you. Being proactive instead of being reactive, and that gets the reactive didn't really work out. So we're a town of 25 to 30 million visitors a year. I'm not sure what the numbers were back then, when we're talking 60s, 70s, but that infrastructure, which we're having, we're going to touch into the present day a little. Is the infrastructure built again for Atlantic City to have another revival? I know we're jumping a little bit, but not a lot has been built in housing, I'm saying.
Well, more people live in a bedroom community than live at the actual resort. There are people who live in Margate, Ventnor, Longport, who are living now out in the county. They live in Galloway Township, Egg Harbor Township. So a lot of the people who lived in the city, who worked in the city when it was the old Atlantic City, no longer live downtown Atlantic City. They live in a suburban area. But the big mistake I think that they've made here in Atlantic City is that when they started the casino industry, they didn't put a wage tax on the people who came here to work in the city. Had there been a wage tax early on, you had some 30,000 people working here. We would have had our streets prepared, we'd have all the other infrastructures put into place, but right now, whatever happens in Atlantic City just gets not as good as it used to be because the dollars are not here to make it work.
You cannot blame casinos for any failings of Atlantic City to be more than it is because government tells them what they can and can't do, all right? And their first mission is to service their patrons. And what everybody knows about business is the key to successful business is repeat business. Yeah. So they go out of the way to keep their patrons happy. State government, I really think, dropped the ball in a lot of ways. City government did, county government did. They relied too much upon the casinos doing everything, and the casinos were like, well, we're going to do what you require us to do, and we're not going to do more than what you require us to do.
Gentlemen, stay right where you're at. Folks, you also stay right where you're at. We'll be right back with these two fine gentlemen. Welcome back, everyone. Let's finish up today's discussion with Judge Nelson Johnson and Mr. Ralph Hunter.
Mike, before I went on the bench, I practiced law, and much of my practice was in Galloway Township. I had the chance to watch faculty members and people connected with the university have a very positive influence on Galloway Township. I kid you not. The town center and where the township hall is, and that whole area of very positive growth, that would not have existed without the leadership of people from Stockton. Mr. Hunter and I have talked about this before, and I'll let him pick up on it. In the past 20, 25 years, the best thing that's happened in Atlantic City is Stockton University. I have real high hopes for what the university, the students, and the faculty can do to help uplift the entire community. You agree, Ralph?
I wholeheartedly agree, Judge. It's simply because you have a university that brings students in from all over the country, as far as New York, Washington, D.C., state of Seattle, California, coming here to come to our beautiful campus we have at the right there on the boardwalk and at the Atlantic Ocean. It's amazing to see those smiles on those students' faces when they have a chance to live that close to the ocean. It's really going to be fantastic for the city, just knowing that the university's here and they're doing great things, not only just locally, but internationally. And I'm really pleased to be a flag waver for Stockton University because of the great work that they've done locally to help the people on the north side as well as the people from Des Moines, Iowa.
2018, it was an amazing turn of events when the grand opening of the Stockton University Atlantic City campus. And again, we were touching on it briefly, just to be able to see those students walking through the streets, Albany Avenue, on the boardwalk, sitting, having a class on the beach. Dr. Jonathan Pitney spoke of health and wellness, right, in 1854, and I think this is part of it. We spoke a little bit about eds and meds. We're gonna backtrack a little bit, but with the Atlantic Care is doing a big thing in Atlantic City.
Atlantic Care has a very positive footprint on the community in terms of extending health services to the community, employing people, very positive footprint.
Atlantic Care, I recently found out there was a gentleman who used to volunteer for the museum some 20 years ago, and he turned out to be having a drug problem, and he was on drugs for many, many years. He called me 3 years ago and told me he was going to go back to school and he was going to get a job working for Atlantic Care. He now runs a program bringing homeless people off the streets for Atlantic Care. And I was so amazed at him when I took him out and bought him dinner last week to see his accomplishment, how he came from here to there. And it would never happen if it wasn't for Atlantic Cape Community College, Stockton University, and of course, Atlantic Care to pick him up and hire him and bring him out to bring the other people off the streets. Amazing.
Mr. Hunter, I'm smiling the way I am because I can appreciate what you're saying, and I know who that gentleman is. Okay. He's a great guy, and we've gotten to know each other. And what Atlantic Care does and brings to the city, along with Stockton University, one of the things I have always hoped and wished when these young men and women at the campus in Atlantic City and here in Galloway, whether it be Atlantic Cape Community College also, take those degrees and stay in that city, because we're going to transition over to what's going on.
Some will and some won't.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
But
they follow the money.
Just their presence and just the school's presence is having a very positive impact on the community, and the way the Atlantic City campus has reached out and is working in cooperation with Atlantic City Boys and Girls Club.
Amazing.
I mean, it's a really positive chemistry. I really like what I see.
It's strong. Dr. Kesselman just recently was on as a guest on the show, and as a Mayflower student, to see it transition back to Atlantic City is amazing. Again, we come in the times we're in 2023 are up on the right on the calendar in a couple weeks. What do we see? And we're going to start with Mr. Hunter. What do we see for Atlantic City in the next, say, 5-10 years? I'm not asking you to rub a crystal ball or anything like that, but
I think in the next 5, 20 years, 15 years, whatever time it takes, I think you're going to see the African American Heritage Museum become part of perhaps one of the greatest universities in our region, Stockton University. That's my hope, it's my dream, it's a dream of my board of directors to be part of this great institution. That's one of the things that I'd love to see happen, both on President's watch as well as others who are really excited about bringing that African American experience to the university in such a way that students from all over the country will learn what took place here 162 years ago.
Yes. Judge Johnson?
My hope is that some of the graduates who leave Stockton upon graduation stay in the community and run for office and serve in government. And by doing that, they will have a very positive impact on Atlantic City's future. That's my hope, that we'll have students that will get active in politics, active in government, and help uplift the entire community.
There you go, fellas. We got about 2 minutes, and I'm going to talk to the students out there and some of our viewers. Listen, the man knows what he's talking about, both of these guys. We want them to come. We need leaders. We were talking about leaders. Gentlemen, take about a minute apiece. What do we see as far as, I don't want to say politicians, public servants, and that form?
I think a public servant's a person who wants to give back to his or her community. And I say his or her because we need both genders to become involved with what's happening in our country and in our government. More and more people have to believe that they can make a difference. One person can make a change. If you believe you can bring something new to the table, bring it, even though the guy next to you thinks you're off the wall. Matters not. It's what you can deliver to the table to bring to people to understand the importance of your belief in another way of getting that apple pie baked.
There you go.
In my lifetime, I have seen women really emerge to become leaders in just about all the professions. I'm not saying, they've displaced men, but they're working side by side with men, and that's a very positive thing. And I'd like to see some of the female students who graduate from Stockton stay in the area, run for public office, serve in public government, and continue to lead the community and uplift the community. And I think they will.
And I hope so. I think with what's going on now, and again, not to knock anything, there's a lot of titles. Listen, you're not a boss, you're a leader. And that's what we call you to do, to be a public servant.
And a leader is somebody who makes themselves indispensable, somebody that they cannot be ignored. You don't have to be the boss to be a leader.
Thank you. Mr. Hunter, we got about 30 seconds.
The humanities are so very, very important. And folks who have the opportunity to want to give back to society are my kind of folk.
Gentlemen, thank you again for coming out. Appreciate it.
Thank you, buddy.
This will continue. Thanks again to Judge Nelson Johnson, author, and Ralph Hunter, founder and director of the African American Heritage Museum of Southern New Jersey. Folks, we'll be right back. Hey folks, it's our belief here at the Mike Lopez TV Show that you, the viewers and our guests, bring the show to life. Thanks again to each and every one of you for joining us. To learn more about AC Mike, go to acmikej.com, AC Mike on Facebook, Mike Lopez, and LiveWorkPlayAC. On Instagram, you can find me at ACMikeNJ. Remember to live, work, play AC, and I'll see you on the 48.